Okay, well, our next presenters are Ivan Stamenov, and he is the VP of Marketing Operations and Technology at the Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And he's going to be joined with Trevor Hadick. He's a Senior Analytics Manager at Merkle. And they're going to present a targeted OTT campaign that they leveraged Merkle's closed loop attribution solution for to achieve a more efficient lead generation campaign. So, hey guys, welcome. How are you?
Hey, hi
Hi.
everyone.
Wow, Trevor, that very cool background there.
Thank you.
Wait, I gotta put on, this warrants the glasses. Okay.
I had to bring some color to the event today.
It's like parrots.
Yes.
Awesome. So, well, and yours is much a blurred background, very.
Well, I'm in my office, so it's
Great.
nothing exciting.
Well, stark
for
to
whiteboards and
parrot.
stuff.
Very, very good combination. Anyway, enough of that. I'll leave it all to you guys. So go take it away.
Sounds good. Let me just start sharing my screen, and we should be on our way. All right. All right. So real quick, Trevor and I, we've been working together, and part of this project has been kind of like a brainchild between the two of us. Hence why we're actually sitting in front of you and just running you through our tests, our learnings in OTT and CTV specifically, and how we've been kind of able to get to a track offline conversions in a cookie-less methodology. Running OTT and CTV campaigns across the board. The intention of this deck is to be really as transparent as possible. And, you will kind of see that we are actually a little bit more prescriptive as well. But really, this allows you to take this presentation as a leave behind on our end and flow it through your teams and really sort of challenge them on, how to add additional rigor to your OTT and CTV campaigns across the board. The good news as well is that we've removed the healthcare vernacular for the most part, but we did keep the marketing verbiage or the marketing lingo, so we should be all good there. And then finally, there are going to be no cliffhangers whatsoever at this point. We'll try to be very open about, how we approach this. And at the end, we will have a QA session that, we could potentially address some of your questions. That being said, we also have some preset or prepared questions that we could cover should there be more time at the end. So real quick, I'm not going to belabor you, with Cancer Treatment Centers of America. It's not necessarily a fun topic to begin with, but we've been pioneers across the board, and Cancer Treatment Centers of America has been around for the last 35 years. And during that period, we've pioneered many new and novel concepts within the healthcare, within patient acquisition and whatnot. So we definitely are the pioneers of direct-to-patient marketing in healthcare, and therefore we kind of built one of the most recognized provider brands in medicine in the U.S. today. Our focus and passion is really towards personalized medicine and which basically enable us to become a leader in this space. We've also created the mother standard of care, which is basically the notion of creating for our patients the way that we would actually care for our mothers, or our mothers would actually care for us. So running into kind of the challenge or the situation that we've had at hand pre-pandemic was that, we were creating a lot of leads, mainly through calls and chats. We were spending north of $100 million a year. And that really sort of created the outcomes that we were looking for. But as we were going into the pandemic, we realized that we need to start becoming more predictive of our revenues, our contribution margins, and our EBITDA. So the main challenge was to really make sure that we are not as invested in marketing in the way that we were, and really focus on the performance levers that we could be pulling rather than just the brand levers, right? So that basically meant that, you know, we need to narrow down the funnel at the top, so we're not necessarily, you know, spending as much for the lead exhaust that we were basically creating. On top of that, as a result of COVID-19, we've noticed a lot of softness at the top of the funnel. And, you know, part of that was that, you know, we did see a huge decline in-person appointments, about 25 to 30% to be precise. And for the most part, IQVIA, who is kind of the oncology medical third-party source that basically aggregates all of the data across all the different HCPs, has confirmed that there was a 37% slowdown in cancer diagnostics and appointments. With that being said, we also had to realign our messaging, right? We knew that, you know, cancer patients have been affected with the fact that, you know, they no longer feel confident that they could actually receive their treatment at a hospital, especially a hospital that actually has acute, you know, treatments across all sorts of different diseases, including COVID. We also had to protect the revenue, basically to de-risk the media buys, or basically, you know, scale down our upfronts, or basically make sure that we are invested in more liquid media. We had to readjust the geographies because we were, and we still are, a national cancer treatment provider, but at the same time, you know, we just had to realize that we are no longer going to get, you know, patients that are, you know, 600, 800 miles away. And then finally, we had to replace the impacted channels like radio, for example. Radio did have a nosedive in listenerships, which was basically indicated by the vehicle miles traveled. So on top of that, during the same period, we also realized that there was a change in behavior. So as Joe was mentioning, and the rest of the panelists as well, we saw a huge increase in OTT consumption across the board. And by the time the US actually went into a national emergency, we saw an increase of about 22%. So that whole thing prompted us to basically start investing in OTT, as you know, by way of testing for the most part. And for the first 3 months that we were actually running this test, we've utilized a couple of platforms, one of them being Hulu, as well as VideoAmp. But ultimately, we stuck with Samsung TV because A, they did provide you know, measurement for us to keep them accountable. But at the same time, what we did see was that they were actually generating tremendous results. If you would take paid search as, you know, kind of like the most efficient channel on our end, OTT was actually able to match that cost of acquisition, which was great news for us. As a result, we have decided that we're actually going to increase our spend by 3 times, basically threefold, or 219%. So going into this, and Trevor is going to cover the rest of this for sure, we've determined a bunch of pillars that were really important as we went into OTT testing. As many of the panelists said already, it was addressability. It was a cookieless tracking and attribution. Agile optimization, basically knowing which levers we should be pulling and when. Control of reach and frequency, and then sustainable acquisition growth. It's really important to stress that, healthcare is the most restricted industry when it comes to marketing. And, with all the HIPAA regulation around, it creates a lot of red tape. That does not necessarily mean that we could use the standard marketing tool sets that, we could actually use to make use of, our audiences or remarketing or any of that. Just so you know, healthcare does not necessarily allow remarketing for the most part. So, those challenges had to be somehow dealt with. So Trevor, why don't you take over the rest of the deck?
Yeah, so a couple of things just to touch on in terms of addressability. The first thing being, as many people have mentioned today, just about the actual audience going in. One of the things when we think about a closed loop reporting solution and attribution is also the ability to test audiences. And so, CTCA in this case partner with Crossix and use the third party audience to actually go ahead and target. But that was broken out by decile. So we were able to understand, is the top decile and the second decile and the third decile, are they performing similarly to one another? Is there differences? And if we continue to expand to, let's say, the fourth decile, how does that efficiency compare? And so when you think about audiences from a closed loop standpoint, obviously there's a base or something to start with, but then there's also the ability to really test into new ones and understand how does that compare, versus the audience that you begin with. The second piece here about this closed loop solution, it really requires a tight relationship between the analytics, the media, and then actually the process as a whole. And so just to walk through this quickly, this was really made on this idea that we're actually taking in first party data. So CTCA's was onboarded into Merkle's identity solution, and then that in combination as well with the media's actual exposures. So taking in an OTT exposure log and then combining those two. So this will de-identify it in a HIPAA compliant way, but then allow us to understand, in the overlap of these two, was there someone who saw this media and then also converted as well? And that allows you to really get into some of these things about, well, is one audience converting versus another one is not? How do I control reach and frequency and things like that? So this kind of core process really allows you to get into that. And then on our end, there's a ton of additional fields you can feed in to understand, is your OTT acquisition actually moving through the funnel all the way to the end? Are there differences in terms of lifetime value and things like that? And so there's a ton of fields that can be brought in. But at the end of the day, it's really an ID database is really required, and this ability to get your exposure logs and your first party data into one centralized ID. And then when we think about this in terms of like the analytics, framework and where does this sit? So, we wouldn't really put this in that multi-touch attribution category because we're mainly focused on this one channel. So obviously there is, interest in the long run to say, okay, how does OTT integrate, with your ATV buy or with your display buy or search? But this is a great place to start just to understand OTT and CTV, and then also just to test new things within it. We also wouldn't put it in that media mix modeling because we're really focused on that direct attribution and we're mainly focused on one single channel. Now, this can become part of a larger really attribution solution, but mainly for that expansion of that testing into OTT, this is really kind of the first step to like a larger project.
And Trevor, just to add to this, right? Other advertisers may actually have a different experience on this because you can definitely match to your GA audiences and pretty much to GCID once your lead actually or your customer actually hits your website as well as your CRM. But as we've mentioned, due to the HIPAA regulation, we are not necessarily allowed to do that. Therefore, we cannot necessarily stitch the patient journey specific to a given patient that was actually exposed. So that's it, guys. At this point, we would love to hear any questions that you guys may have and just run through those. We do have, as I said, some prepared questions that we could definitely walk through.
That was great, guys. Definitely, Trevor, Ivan, thank you. In terms of, I mean, really, I think a lot of people are really interested right now in that geo-marketing, geo-targeting kind of ability. And talk about that a little bit. How can you expand that and continue moving forward with that?
Yeah, look, the way we kind of started, Lisa, was to really test out OTT and CTV in markets where we have scale, right? The key reason for that was really to have statistical significance in our measurement, number one. Number two, if these strategy would ever work somewhere, they would actually work within our high proximity markets. So we initially started off with 5 of the biggest markets, or actually 6: New York, Tulsa, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Atlanta, and I would say Phoenix. And once we had the initial proof of concept, then we rapidly started, launching these efforts across smaller DMAs. We manage our business at a DMA level. So think of it in a way that, each and every DMA would have some sort of media plan that we would actually adhere to based on the performance of the DMA. So, with this process, right, we utilized cross-6 audiences, which are basically audiences that have healthcare data appended to them that is not necessarily CTCA's data. And that would gauge for us the propensity of someone actually being a lookalike to a cancer patient. And then on top of that, we layered in the DMA targeting, which actually gave us, that sort of framework that we are currently using and we're still using with OTT and CTV.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering, because I mean, obviously, this is a very specific time during, and especially in the health industry during a pandemic. Is this something that you see can move forward even as things go back to more normal circumstances?
Absolutely. Not only OTT and CTV, we are also trying to test addressable TV across the board as well. We are still sort of working through the measurement plan to begin with, and kind of replicate what we have here with OTT. As soon as we're done with that, we are definitely planning on launching the addressable TV component. But for sure, I think the scalability of OTT really depends on finding the right audiences, right? And we ran into a predicament with some of the DMAs where our data partner or audience partner, Crossix, did not have enough audiences to be targeted within a specific DMA. So unfortunately, we had to forego those DMAs altogether. Should that change, of course, as more data becomes available, we'll definitely pivot into expanding into other DMAs.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, I've talked with a lot of people and really figuring out how that geo-targeting really has become something that people are finding, a lot of brands are finding a lot of value with. And so obviously you found a perfect example where you find a lot of success with it. So thanks, guys. I
Absolutely.
really appreciate you doing your presentation and being here with us.